According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, in the US alone, 10 million teenagers a year are afflicted by major depression. A further 6 million by anxiety. Of the 10 million who suffer from depression, nearly 60% will not receive treatment. And of those who suffer from anxiety, over 80%. I ask you, how is it possible that such common mental health issues within our societies remain unsolved? Every year, millions of teenagers around the world who would greatly benefit from therapy are denied access due to a multitude of reasons. This lack of access can have multiple negative impacts. They can stunt a teenager's physical, mental, and emotional growth, compound previously existing issues, and lead to increased substance abuse rates and suicide rates within a community. However, in order to understand this problem so that meaningful improvements can be made, we must first break down and isolate the root causes of it. First, many teenagers encounter a physical barrier to accessing therapy. Depending on your social class, wealth, and where you live, therapy options may not be available to you. These I label as physical, material barriers. Second, the countless stereotypes and myths which surround therapy can result in either a parent choosing to ignore signs of their teen that therapy may be a good option, or more commonly, teenagers choosing not to reach out for help. These I label as abstract barriers. And not only are these abstract barriers always false, but they paint a negative image around therapy, one that is quite difficult to change. And ultimately, it is quite difficult to effect change for many of the material barriers that teenagers will encounter. After all, we're not going to be solving inequalities throughout the world in just one day through one TEDx speech. And yet, the same cannot be said for the countless abstract barriers that teenagers face every single day, that people like you and me can solve day by day within our respective communities by watching what we say and what we teach those around us. Now, in order to first correct our own behavior and approach towards therapy, we must understand the most prominent stereotypes that surround it and how exactly they have a negative impact. The first stereotype I want to talk about is possibly the most important one, that therapy is supposedly a sign of weakness. The amount of times that I have heard this from those around me and online on social media is immeasurable. Unfortunately, this simple statement can often have the greatest negative impact, especially on teenage boys. In a confusing period of their lives, they are often unsure of themselves, easily impressionable, and trying their very best to fit into the mold that society has set for them, which is often to be strong, stoic, and unwavering. When therapy is painted as an indicator for weakness, no teenage boy will pursue it, regardless of how badly they may need it or how greatly they may benefit from it. Second, that therapy for teenagers is a permanent commitment. The image of therapy that is fed to us by the media we consume is one of serious commitment. That a teenager will need to go 2-3 times a week for years on end of intense sessions. This, quite simply, is not true. Depending on the teenager and the issue which they wish to address, therapy can last anywhere from a few weeks or months to multiple years, with the frequency ranging from 1 to 2 times a week to 1 to 2 times a month. The most important part is that this process is, in its entirety, transparent. If the teenager feels ready to quit therapy, then they are free to do so, and they should not be daunted by this prospect. Lastly, that therapy for teenagers is only for the most detrimental of issues. Now, don't get me wrong, without a doubt, therapy is a great tool for dealing with severe mental health problems such as depression. However, regardless of whether a teenager chooses to go to therapy because they suffer from depression or simply because they are unhappy with where they are in their life, they are completely justified in their decision. A teenager's problems should not be discredited merely because the person next to them has it harder than them. Every teenager on this planet has a right to emotional support, and it is our collective duty to ensure that they receive this. So now that we've understood what these most prominent stereotypes are, how can everyone in our communities, most notably role models such as parents, take steps towards fixing them? As a parent, you must first understand this. If your child decides to seek out therapy, you have not failed in your job as a parent. External circumstances completely out of your control could have resulted in this, and you should not be ashamed of either yourself or your child. Rather, you should treat their request with understanding and provide support in whichever way you see fit. As I've already mentioned, every teen has a right to emotional support, and if needed, you should be ready to provide it. Most importantly, make sure not to pass on any of the negative notions which you may carry about therapy yourself onto your teenager. These stereotypes that I've already mentioned often stem from older generations, when therapy, especially for teenagers, wasn't as socially acceptable as it is today. However, this responsibility of not passing on negative stereotypes surrounding teen therapy rests not only on the shoulders of parents, but on everyone in our communities, all the role models, a friend, a relative, a teacher, a coach, a counselor. These are all people that, aside from a teenager's parents, will likely have the greatest impact on them and their development. I am confident that every single person in this room today fulfills at least one of these criteria. And that is why it is so important that we all watch the comments we make surrounding teen therapy, for we never know who is listening and how our words may have an impact on them in the future. That is why, regardless of context, whether it is a joke, whether it is said flat out, whether you say it under your breath, there is no place for redundant and harmful phrases like therapy is useless or therapy is for the weak. If all of us step up and watch what we say, we can each have a positive impact. No matter how small, together, it will amount to something serious. I hope that my speech today has made you a little bit more aware of some of these misconceptions surrounding teen therapy, and possibly even made you aware of some of the stereotypes you carry yourself. Now, without a doubt, a lot of progress has been made in normalizing therapy, and yet there is still a long way to go. To visualize this, I ask that you entertain this scenario. Imagine that, as a teenager, you've been quite sick the past few weeks. You're unable to go to school, you've been lying in bed, you're coughing, medication hasn't helped. Please, a show of hands, who here would go see the doctor? All right. Now imagine, still a teenager, that you've been quite upset the past few weeks. You're not finding enjoyment in your day-to-day life, you're doing worse in school, you're more anxious, you're not enjoying your hobbies. Please answer honestly, as there's no wrong answer. Who here would choose to go see a therapist as a teenager? As expected, significantly less hands went up. And yet, why is it that we view these two scenarios as so different? In both, an aspect of your health has declined. Conventional medications and treatments have not worked, it's impacted your quality of life, and so you seek out the guidance and help of a professional. The only difference between these two scenarios is that one concerns your physical health, while the next concerns your mental health, which has been historically stigmatized and continues to be stigmatized to this day. Ultimately, I merely ask that you watch the comments you make surrounding therapy for teenagers, and instead sow the seeds of a positive outlook of therapy for teens, so that no single teenager in this world who has access to therapy and who's in need of it is afraid or ashamed ever to reach out for the help which they deserve. Thank you.